Hey guys, happy Friday. Meredith Hurston here, and I'd like to wish you all a very happy and prosperous Juneteenth. This is Juneteenth of 2020, and I have a few reflections that I would like to share with you regarding this holiday and give you a little bit of history about why it's meaningful to me. Juneteenth, I would say the first time that I probably came to knowing about the holiday was probably around somewhere between 1997 and the year 2000 when I was still living in Flint, Michigan. They started having a Juneteenth celebration, I believe in 1997, and they would have like I think a several day concert down at Riverbank Park. And so one year, my mom wanted to go, so we both went down there, and they had several performing artists, and I think they may have, spoken about the history of Juneteenth. And at the time, I was probably in my early 20s, and it wasn't something that interested me. I hadn't really heard of Juneteenth before, and it didn't register. I wasn't really like a history buff or anything like that. So I don't think I was really paying attention on like that and really understood the significance of it. And I probably did not understand the significance of it until I was probably in my early to mid 30s. And that being said, I never really participated in any organized celebrations outside of the times that I did go to Riverbank Park in Flint. But this year, Juneteenth of 2020, is a definite change. Change is palpable because the world is evolving since this pandemic, is here. Everybody's kind of on pause. Their daily routines are on pause. People aren't traveling. People aren't taking their kids to soccer. They aren't taking their kids to dance. They have a lot more time to, spend at home with family, listening to the news and really observing, what's going on. And with the recent murder of George Floyd at the hands of a Minneapolis police officer, it really highlighted the issue that we have with police brutality. Now, we all know that Black people have been, trying to blow the whistle on police brutality for the last, I don't know, however many years since Rodney King, and nobody was really paying attention. They're just like, oh, if you would comply, Black people wouldn't have these issues if they would just be compliant. But I think, I personally have not watched the George Floyd video. I can't do it. So I have seen some still images, and that's about, all that I can take. But I think, so many people all around the world have had access, to the video, 8 minutes and 46 seconds, that a man held his knee on another man's neck and, just allowed the life to leave his body. And that's very tragic. It's very traumatic. It's terrifying, and so many other, words that you could use to describe that horror. And I think that's really what made people sit up and pay attention and say, what's really going on here? Because they don't have to take, their daughter to soccer, or they don't have to take her to dance lessons. Like, after you watch that video, you just kind of sit there and you're like, well, what just happened? So people started, standing up saying that this isn't right. So for this particular Juneteenth celebration, like, change is palpable. Like, so many things are different. And one of the things that stands out to me is through my employer. I work for the Johns Hopkins Hospital, and they gave us 4 hours of paid time off today to reflect and contemplate the meaning behind Juneteenth and to celebrate it. If we choose to, we have the option to take 4 hours. And I'm very thankful for that. I have a lot of gratitude for that, that they are finding value in celebrating this holiday and wanting to make some lasting changes in terms of diversity and inclusion in the way they operate and do things. I think that's important. And to further that point, back on June the 5th, we had an observance for White Coats for Black Lives, and it was very well attended. I posted a video, Facebook Live showing, us out there, kneeling and saying the names of the numerous people. And it wasn't all of them, of course, but of the many of numerous people that have died at the hands of police brutality. And it was a beautiful sight. It had to be at least 500 people there. It quite possibly could have been more, but everybody just kind of standing in solidarity. In that moment, I felt supported, and it felt to me like change was, starting to happen. And at first, I kind of wasn't sure. I was being a little cynical about it. I'm like, I don't know if they're really for real, but and I'm not, when I say them, I'm not referring just to Johns Hopkins, like people in general, because we've seen corporations speak out. We've seen, sports figures speak out. We've seen government officials speak out about, police brutality and getting behind the movement of Black Lives Matter. And that's big. That's big. And it's not just Black people, it's white people, our allies that are finally standing in the gap and saying, paying attention and saying that this, this needs to stop and change needs to happen. So I'm very thankful for that. But in addition to sharing those reflections about how it has impacted me personally this year, I would be remiss if I did not talk about history from my family's perspective in terms of the role my mom played in the civil rights movement as a freedom fighter. My mom originally is from a very small town in Alabama called Camp Hill, which is out on the outskirts of Lafayette, Alabama, which is another small town. But she graduated high school in 1956, and she went on to Selma College, which was a 2-year college, and she graduated from Selma College and transferred on to Alabama A&M University to complete her bachelor's degree in education. And after she completed her bachelor's degree, she stayed in Alabama for a few years. But if I'm not mistaken, she relocated to Michigan in 1963, and she started teaching at the Beecher Community Schools, which is a suburb of Flint, Michigan. And in 1965, she decided to participate in the March on Montgomery. That was during the Civil Rights Movement, where the people marched from Selma over to Montgomery, Alabama. And my mom took some time off and went down to Alabama to participate in that. And I remember when I was probably a teenager, my mom took me to see a play. I don't remember the name of the play, but I remember the person that it was about. It was about Mrs. Viola Luizzo. She was a citizen of Detroit, Michigan, and she was a white lady. She went down to Alabama to, she basically was a freedom rider herself. She was helping transport people between Selma and Montgomery. She was just being a facilitator and being an ally and, standing in the gap and supporting the civil rights movement. And while my mom was in Alabama, I want to say she was there with some of her colleagues. I'm not really sure of all the details. I'm a little foggy on that. But I recall my mom telling me that while she was there, Viola Luizzo was killed by the Ku Klux Klan because she had a Black man in her car, and she was driving him from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. And I think my mom was like on a bus. They were, making preparations to, get back to Michigan. And they kind of got held up because this murder had taken place and the atmosphere was not safe. It was not safe for them to travel. And so whoever was a part of the group that my mom was with, they actually had to make a call to the governor of Michigan, who at the time was, it was Governor Romney, Governor George Romney in 1965. And they had to make a call to Governor Romney, and he ended up chartering a plane to come get them and in Alabama and bring them back to Michigan so that they, would be safe. So, my mother, like, that's something, a proud family fact of mine is that my mother was a freedom rider. And I think that's important in this day and time, and just, thinking about Juneteenth. Juneteenth is the celebration of freedom from the Emancipation Proclamation, which ended slavery. And that was signed in the fall of 1862, and it went into effect on January 1st of 1863. So January 1st, 1863 was the first day that, enslaved Africans were being, freed. They were considered free people. And the unfortunate, twist of fate is that the last enslaved Africans were not notified of their freedom until June the 19th of 1865. That was 2.5 years later. Like, how tragic is that? That's mind-blowing and crazy to me, that the powers that be, the people of, Texas, the slave owners and slave masters in Texas, would, violate the executive order and the Emancipation Proclamation and keep those people enslaved for another 2.5 years. And they finally were freed on June the 19th of 1865. And, freedom is important. I think oftentimes we take our freedom for granted. And we shouldn't. We should really pay attention and understand our history and understand where it is that we come from and the roles that our ancestors played, the roles that our parents and grandparents played. This is 2020, so 1865, for a lot of us, that's between 3 and 5 generations removed. So we're not that far, removed from slavery. It may seem like a long time ago, but it hasn't even been 200 years yet. It's been 150 160 some years the slavery has ended. So that's between 3 and 5 generations away. We're not that far removed from slavery. So those are the things that I've been reflecting on today on Juneteenth. And in addition to reflecting and doing a little bit of research, I also took the time to start watching the Watchmen series, which is available for free on HBO.com this weekend. And I also had a chance to screen a movie called Miss Juneteenth. It's a movie based on the Miss Juneteenth pageant that takes place in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas. And it was a really heartwarming film. It was produced by a husband and wife, or produced and directed by a husband and wife couple, Channing and Neil. So I'll drop a link for where you can find that. It's streaming everywhere. I invite you to check that out. And I thank you for watching today, and I hope that you had a blessed and prosperous Juneteenth, and I will see you next time. Bye.